Hello and welcome back to my weekly podcast on the history of Georgian art. Today we are going to discuss the history of traditional metalwork in Georgia. This tradition, unlike other fields of art that I talked to you about, like medieval architecture and sculpture and all that, this area goes back to much earlier times. The first artifacts that archaeology has found in the territory of Georgia that are made with fine technique of goldsmiths are dated back to the 3rd millennia, which suggests that time Georgia had a tradition of working on metals, including gold and silver. You have probably heard of the myth of Golden Fleece and Argonauts. I'm not going to tell you the whole myth, of course. You can look it up on your own. But the place to which Jason and his companions traveled to is ancient Colchis, which is Georgia, the western part of Georgia, the Black Sea coast. And particularly it is ancient Pazisi, which is Poti these days. Now, from that period of time, we have absolutely amazing works of art. Well, first of all, before we move on to the works of art, I wanted to tell you about this gold mining in Georgia. That legend or myth can just be a myth or a legend or just, not a true story. We don't know. Because, Greeks are very intelligent and they were always up for a good story. So it's likely that the inspiration for that story came from the fact that gold mining tradition was very widespread in Georgia at that time. Particularly the technique of gold mining Georgians were using is very interesting, which is also kind of infiltrated in that myth. The very idea of golden fleece, that's where it comes from, that Georgians used to take the sheep's skins, and put them in rivers against the stream. Because in ancient times, they say, maybe even now, we don't know, but in ancient times it was very widespread that rivers of Caucasus contained gold sand. So when they put this sheep's skin against the stream of water, those little teeny tiny little pieces of gold were entangled in the sheep's skin, so that after a while this skin was heavy and filled with gold. That's why they gathered this gold. That's how gold mining was taking place. So that story is quite true. Also, it was not just with rivers, but gold was found in underground, in the geological kind of this ground rather than just in water. Now, when it comes to ancient pieces of work, I have these very fine works of art coming from early times. They were mainly found in burial mounds of rich people, probably. Most of them are made with gold. Some of them are made with bronze or silver and then plated with gold. But nevertheless, when you look at them, the fine work is very obvious. Now, like Trialeti bowl, for example, is also adorned with precious gems, which suggests that during that time, actually these are not as early as 3 millennium, it's 2nd millennium, this trialeti bowl that it comes from, and it's embellished with precious gemstones, which suggests that even gemstones were obtainable that time. Now here we have temple jewelry, and also these belts, belt buckles, the bronze belt buckles are very famous, and also they kind of manifest the presence of Greco-Roman culture in Georgia that time, in ancient times, because there is a lot of influence here. Now, in antiquity, there is no, we don't have a separate statues of idols, but it may be, the reason may be because Christians usually destroy them, and maybe that's part why we don't have them, but we don't know. Maybe they were made with wood rather than precious metals. Now, after ancient times, when Christianity spread in Georgia, you would expect that there would have been this metalwork following this Christian and expressing Christian, new Christian religion. However, in early Christian period, there is not much that we have. It may be partly because they are lost, but we don't know much about it. The early Christian time does not really have much to present itself in goldsmith and metalwork. The first existent work that we have is not work, but icon, let's say. Yes, because it really is the first metal icon that we have is Zarzma icon, which is dated to the 9th century, which, if you remember, is not exactly, well, I don't want to show you this yet, because we are going to talk about iconography later, so I'm going to hide this bit from you, and I'm going to show you this one. This is Zarzma icon of the Holy Transfiguration. It's very much damaged, as you see, but you can still trace the style which it was made with. Well, first of all, the most widespread technique of metalwork in Georgia is that it is hammered from the reverse side. It's called repoussé, or repoussé in French. It's hammered from the back of the work, which is in front of you, so that you see the other side, so that it represents the presentation from the back. I mean, the artist, the master, is working from the reverse side, not from the front. So when you look at this composition, the relief, let's say, is pretty low. Relief I mentioned because if you remember last time when we spoke about relief sculpture in Georgia, I told you that there is a similar tendency in goldsmith, in metalwork, that it begins, the first examples begin with a very low relief, and then it gains more volume, it becomes more sculptural, it is more raised from the background, and then it goes down again as a kind of decline in the end. But it's kind of slightly different here. I'll tell you about it. But as you see here, just like in relief, this is also very low carving, which a bit later, in the 10th century, oh, what happened? I'm sorry, I've lost my bookmarks in my bag. That's why I have to be a bit more spontaneous. I'm going to show you from here, this one, because it's easier to find it here. Now, this is Ishani Cross, 10th century. And as you see, there is more volume here. However, it's still very archaic. Well, it's not exactly archaic in 10th century, but compared to later ones, it's still archaic because there is even no attempt to show anatomical details. It's kind of a bit stiffer, the whole body. But what it does, obviously, and you can see it, the figure of Jesus is very much raised from the background. It's almost like an independent sculpture. Okay. And this is a kind of transitional period, what we call in Georgian architecture, if you remember. After that, in the 11th century, there is more tendency for originality, for the more interest to decorativeness. And you may feel that it's a bit overloaded, but you know, it's almost like a master is carried away by more and more working more and more diligently with these things. Like here, this is a cross from Mestia, from Svaneti, this one. And it's distinguished by being highly original, even in the choice of the scenes. It describes the scenes from the martyrdom of Saint George, which is a very, very great saint, especially for Svanetians. It is a great saint, and it is a patron saint for Georgia on the whole, but Svanetians have taken his cult to such a degree that they almost worship him. You know, I know this proper to worship God alone and venerate the saints, but Svanetians have a very, very special reverence for Saint George. And as you see, his martyrdom is described here in great detail. All these sins describe every single thing what has been done to him when he was martyred. And you see here on the lower part, there is Archangel standing there as a protector, his protector during all this cycle of martyrdom. Now, I'm sorry, I don't want to move on to very late. No, here. Again, 11th century. This time is this time is a time of when Georgian goldsmith has been flourishing. As you see, this very, very fine work. I wouldn't say carving. I mean, it almost comes to my mouth to say this very fine carving, but it's not carving, as I already told you. It's hammered from behind, and that makes it even more amazing, because when you are carving from the front, it's still very difficult and you have to have a very great skill, but nevertheless you're looking at it from the front, so you're working there in that area. But when you're looking from the back, you almost don't know what it's going to show in the front when you stick this hammer there or hit it. But if you imagine working like that and coming out with this outcome, with this result, this is quite amazing. It's so dynamic, and it's almost like, if you remember that Art Deco, Art Nouveau style in Western Europe, it almost goes with, it almost like that, but this is 11th century. It's so very much earlier. But these works are truly and absolutely amazing. One thing I want to tell you is that earlier works, and including this period, But here in this icon of the Mother of God, you see that the face is no longer metalworked. It's left for iconography, right? Well, if you look at this icon of St. George here, it's all metalwork, including the face, including the body. So earlier times, in earlier periods, icons, actually, I mean metal icons, let's say, because there are icons and there are painted icons, but the metal ones were made all covered in this metal worked, the whole thing, everything. St. George, Diocletian, everything was like this. However, in the later period, the room was given for painted faces, painted areas of the body, and the rest was covered with metal, let's say, garment or robe or something like that, which is the whole icon except these body parts. Okay, yes, here I also wanted to tell you, here you see this this round depiction of Saint Mamas of Caesarea, which is quite an interesting thing here. He was a child martyr, but well, he doesn't really look like a child here, but young person. And it does follow the Byzantine iconography, the way it's placed on the lion, sitting on a lion. Yes, here we have this cross, another cross from Sadgeri. And the interesting thing about this cross is something that unfortunately I cannot emphasize here because it's too small. If I find a bigger version of it, I can probably enlarge it and zoom it in and show you that particular scene from the life of St. George where he pierces, well, he's fighting with Diocletian, but Diocletian is mounted on a horse, which is absolutely different from any kind of iconography, including Byzantine ones or Georgian ones. This is the only one which has Diocletian sitting on a horse, and which is very interesting, but very unusual. Actually, I wanted to tell you that these people who were making this metalwork were highly original, which I'm going to tell you about something about it in the end. This originality was something very important. Now, one of the absolute treasures of Georgian metalwork, goldsmith, is the icon or triptych of Chachuli. Chachuli is a cathedral in ancient Georgian province, which is in present Turkey. This icon initially was made in 10th century. Then King David the Builder and his son Demetre I brought it to Gelati Monastery in the 12th century and decided to re-embellish it and remake this whole thing, this metalwork, so that on the other side, when they close this triptych on the door from outside, let's say, it says, it praises the King David and King Demetre, his son Demetre I. So that's how we know this story, that they were the redecorators and re-embellishers of this icon. However, this icon was stolen in the 19th century. According to some sources, they were stolen by Russians, and in the end it ended up in the collection of Botkin, after which it was finally given back to Georgia in 1923. Not earlier than that. So at the moment it is in the museum in Tbilisi. If you look at it, So the central area is obviously robbed. Whoever stole it took all this gold and precious stones and everything that it was decorated with, and it doesn't exist anymore. The face and hands were made with enamel, and I'm not going to tell you more about it now because we are going to have a separate session on Georgian cloth on enamel later, so it's going to be some kind of separate thing, so I'm not going to tell you more about it now. But in the central area, the metalwork in there is made with lower relief, let's say, while the sides have much deeper carving. Again, it's not carving, but it's kind of are more raised, or, well, I wouldn't say embossed because embossing is a different technique. Raised would be the word. And probably the reason why it is done so is that this area pays more attention to icons and enamel icons as well, which are put enamel medallions presenting the faces of archangels and saints, while the side ones, the lateral ones, the sides, are more decorated with metalwork. The more emphasis is given to it. However, some people believe that there must have been two different masters working on them, and that's the reason why the levels of relief are different. But we don't know much about it, unfortunately, because the inscription which it has only mentions King David and his son Demetre, and not the ones who made it, not the artists, the actual artists. So I'm sorry about this. Just a moment. Yes. Another thing that I wanted to take your attention to is the names of Beka and Beshken Obizaris. Well, some people believe that they might have been brothers, but we don't know much about it because there is no record of their biography except that their names, Obizari, suggest that they must have been related to the monastery of Obiza, which is also in the present-day Turkey. Now, Beka Obizari, we know from written sources that he made this cover of Tsarostavi Gospel, which has two sides. The front side, which you see here, depicts crucifixion, and the back one, the other side, describes stasis or supplication. Here, the other one that belongs to his hand, but not the whole thing, only the frame of the icon of Anchi. This is a very, very famous icon. We believe that it is a uncreated icon. Well, we shall talk about it when we have a session about Georgian icons. But the frame was made by Beka Obizari, which proves that he must have been a very qualified artist, that such an important and responsible job was given to him, entrusted to him. Okay, so this is Anchi, and later period. You may think that, like architecture or wall paintings or this or that, there must have been a decline. But, well, there was some decline after 12th century, 13th century, let's say, and we don't have much after that in Georgian metalwork. But the 16th century is very, very interesting. It's very different. It unites different, okay, I'll show you this first. Well, I didn't want to. It unites different influences, different elements from different cultures, like this one, which is called Jerusalem icon of the Savior of Jesus Christ. You may think that this is a Russian icon. It's not, it's Georgian, but you can feel some Russian flavor there. There is some kind of influence. Also, this one, let's see. this is the Mother of God, also the same time. And this has some kind of Persian, it kind of displays some Persian influence. It may be detected in the use of turquoise a lot, which was not present in the earlier times, because that's where we got it from, probably. And the other thing is this, even the iconography, the face of the Mother of God, it's kind of not very Georgian. There is some kind of obvious influence, but if you look at the ornaments, yes, again, Persian ornaments are very much like this. But I always also remember those relief ornaments on churches, like ribbons, like on phrases. If you remember them, it is very much like that. If you look at this top ribbon and the bottom one, it's very, very much like that. It kind of resembles that. And it's very lively. It's very kind of almost overloaded, but the artist is obviously very much into it. And we have so many samples from that period of time that it proves that they probably had workshops, just like they did in earlier times in Berka and Beshken or Pisaris times. As about the modern period, modern metalwork, what can I tell you? I'm always kind of lamenting and saying not very nice things about it, but well, it's not that bad, you know. When it comes to metalwork, we do have some obvious replicas and obvious copies of old items, old works of art. In our contemporary time, but at the same time there are some original works too. However, there is always a reference to the fact or suggestion that Georgian artists see their identity in a medieval times, and they feel like if they want to do something Georgian, to create something Georgian, they have to do what our ancestors did. And it kind of worries me a lot. Now look at this one. This is the icon painted by His Holiness Ilya II, icon of the Holy Trinity. But I want to draw your attention to this frame, which is made with metalwork. I mean, it's a good work. There is nothing wrong with it. It's good, but you know, you can feel that somebody is making it just because they know that this is how our ancestors used to do it, or this is what they used to do. Now, when I think about this problem of our identity, originality, and why we do not create more original works these days. Well, by original, I don't mean original for the sake of originality. I mean something that truly and authentically would express our identity, just like our ancestors did in the past. Actually, I was reading the other day a book by Thomas Kulka, and he's talking about, the book is about kitsch. And this author says that the main difference between art and kitsch is that kitsch is concerned with what, while art is asking a question, how. And I always have this in mind too, myself, that the reason why we love those churches or those frescoes and they are moving us to prayer is that they are made authentically. The way they were made, that's what matters. They were made out of love and desire to praise God in an way that would have been natural to those artists, to them, and not by some kind of command that this is what you should be doing. And that's what worries me a lot, that in modern times, when things are created for churches, mostly they are copied from those examples as they are, not as they were made, not out of free creativity, out of originality, out of authenticity and being true to your own self, which is what I think what matters most. So, as about today, what we spoke about today is that tradition of goldsmith and metalwork in Georgia has a very, very long history. In ancient times, it was a lot of jewelry, household items, lots of things which were made. In medieval times, we had icons, we had processional crosses and, let's say, liturgical accessories, lots of them. And it kind of continues to the present day, making of same things, including jewelry and including the church items. However, I want to express my wish again that I hope that Georgian liturgical artists will one day find their way of making more authentic, more original works of art in the spirit of our ancestors, but finding more modern forms which are more natural to our times. If you enjoyed our podcast, please don't forget to subscribe and press like. Thank you very, very much. Bye for now.